In a corporate building in downtown Chicago. Nobody paid much attention to Maria when she pushed her cleaning cart down the gleaming hallways of the towering skyscraper. They'd seen her every day, an unassuming black woman with a gentle smile, always busy cleaning up after the high-powered executives. To them, she was invisible, a mere fixture of the office, whose only purpose was to make their environment spotless. The employees, often dismissive of her, would laugh behind her back. They'd joke about her accent or her humble position, always assuming that she was just a woman who cleaned. No one suspected there was more to Maria than met the eye. But Maria had spent years honing her skills, not just in the art of cleaning, but in understanding business, finance, and the intricate world of corporate strategy. She had quietly worked her way up, not in the traditional sense, but by learning, watching, and understanding the very system that had overlooked her. One afternoon, after years of listening to the CEO's disrespectful comments about her and other staff members, Maria decided it was time to act. The CEO, a pompous man who had no regard for those beneath him, made one final remark that pushed her over the edge. He had openly mocked her in front of others during a meeting about budget cuts, insinuating that those like her had no place in corporate discussions. Maria had had enough. She took the elevator to the top floor, walking through the pristine lobby. The receptionist gave her a glance, but Maria didn't stop. She had a purpose. At the CEO's office door. She knocked gently before entering without waiting for permission. The CEO looked up, startled to see the woman who had once only been a face in the hallway. Without a word, Maria walked up to the CEO's desk and calmly laid down a series of documents in front of him. They were meticulously prepared reports showing financial mismanagement and unethical practices at the highest levels of the company. The CEO stared at her in confusion. "What is this?" he asked, clearly caught off guard. Maria took a deep breath. "This, Mr. Turner, is evidence of your incompetence. I have been watching, learning, and working, and I now have enough leverage to take control of this company." She had been working with a group of shareholders who had long been dissatisfied with Turner's leadership, and they had offered her a position of power to help turn things around. Maria had quietly assembled the documents and gathered the necessary backing to oust the CEO from his position. Before Turner could react, she pressed a button on her phone, and the security team arrived at the door. She looked him in the eye one last time, her voice calm but firm. "Effective immediately, you're no longer the CEO of this company." With that, Maria turned and walked out of the office, leaving behind the stunned silence of the corporate world. The employees, who had once laughed at her, would soon learn the truth about their humble cleaning lady. Word spread quickly throughout the building. By the time Maria had left the CEO's office, the entire corporate floor was abuzz. Some whispered in disbelief, others in shock, but no one dared to question her. She had walked in as the cleaning lady, but she had left as the one who had just dethroned the highest authority in the building. Maria had always known she was underestimated. Her quiet, humble demeanor had never been a weakness but a tool. For years, she had watched, listened, and observed the patterns of behavior, the company's inner workings, and the corruption that ran beneath the polished exterior. She knew the system from the inside out, but most of all, she understood the power dynamics that held everything together. Her advantage was that no one suspected her. The shareholders who had quietly supported her knew what she was capable of. Over the years, Maria had made small but important alliances with key players in the company. She had shown them that she was more than just the woman who cleaned their offices. She had a brilliant mind for numbers, for strategy, and for leadership. Maria had kept her ambitions to herself for so long, but she knew when the time was right, she would strike. That time had come. As she walked back to the lobby, her phone buzzed with messages from the board members. "We've got your back," they wrote. "You're in control now." She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button to the 40th floor, the penthouse that had been reserved for the CEO and his executives. The space was grand, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the entire city. Maria had always marveled at the opulence of the CEO's office, the kind of space that screamed power, dominance, and wealth. Now it would be hers. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped out with confidence. The employees who were working at their desks turned their heads in surprise as she passed them by, no longer just the cleaning lady but someone they now needed to reckon with. She walked into the CEO's office and sat down at his massive desk, her fingers grazing the polished wood as she looked over the sprawling cityscape. Maria called a meeting with the board members, and by the end of the day, she was officially the new CEO. Her first order of business was a complete restructuring of the company. She began by eliminating the toxic practices that had allowed people like the former CEO to rise to power in the first place. She moved swiftly, making changes that shocked the staff. She fired those who had been complicit in unethical practices, offering new positions to employees who had been overlooked and underappreciated. Maria's leadership style was firm but fair, and she made it clear that she valued integrity, hard work, and collaboration above all else. Over the next few weeks, the company underwent a dramatic transformation. Employee morale soared as they saw that their voices were being heard. The financial outlook improved as Maria brought in new strategies, cutting waste and redirecting resources to innovation. She knew that the company needed to not only recover from the years of poor management but also rise above its past to set a new standard in corporate governance. As the months passed, the company's reputation began to shift. News outlets covered the dramatic rise of Maria, the cleaning lady turned CEO, and her success in turning the company around. People were fascinated by her story. How had she done it? How had she gone from cleaning floors to running a multi-billion-dollar company? But Maria wasn't interested in the spotlight. She wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. She was simply doing what she had always known she could do. She had a vision for a better company, and she was determined to see it through. Behind closed doors, Maria met with the former CEO, who had been dismissed in disgrace. He had tried to fight her move, but in the end, he had no choice but to leave quietly. He had underestimated her, and now he had lost everything. "I never thought you'd amount to anything," he sneered when he saw her. "You were just a cleaning lady." Maria looked at him with calm assurance. "I'm still a cleaning lady," she said softly. "But now I'm cleaning up your mess." The former CEO's face twisted with rage, but he knew it was futile. He had no power anymore, and Maria had taken it all. As time went on, Maria proved to be a leader like no other. Her rise to power wasn't just about taking control, it was about giving power to those who had been silenced, overlooked, and forgotten. She built a company that valued respect and innovation. Employees who had been underappreciated for years now found themselves in positions of influence. She had created a corporate culture that was centered around equality, diversity, and ethical business practices. But Maria didn't stop there. She began advocating for other companies to adopt similar changes, speaking out against the entrenched systems of power that kept people like her from rising to the top. She became an inspiration for others who had been overlooked, who had been told they weren't enough, or who had been told their place was at the bottom. Maria's story became a legend, not just in the business world, but in the hearts of people everywhere. The woman who had once been laughed at and dismissed had become a symbol of strength, resilience, and the power of believing in oneself. And though her journey had been difficult, Maria knew that the fight for change was never truly over. But for now, she had done what no one thought she could do. She had fired the CEO, and in doing so, had rewritten the rules of the game. Months had passed since Maria had taken over as CEO, and the company was thriving. The changes were palpable, employees were more engaged, profits were rising, and the culture of arrogance that had defined the company for so long had been replaced by an atmosphere of collaboration, mutual respect. Maria had kept her promises. She was transforming not just the business, but also the hearts and minds of those who had doubted her. But with success came new challenges. Maria's rise had not gone unnoticed by competitors. Some saw her as a threat, others as a symbol of the changing landscape of corporate power, where women, people of color, and outsiders could no longer be ignored. It was a welcome shift for some, but others were more resistant, unwilling to accept that things were no longer as they had been. One such competitor was the CEO of a rival corporation, Jonathan Fairbanks. He had built his company with a strict hierarchy, where loyalty to him was paramount, and anything outside the norm was seen as a threat to his power. When the news of Maria's success began to circulate, Jonathan saw it as an affront to his way of doing business. He had built his empire on traditional methods, and he was willing to do whatever it took to maintain the status quo. Maria was aware of the growing animosity. As her company began to rise in stature, Jonathan Fairbanks launched a smear campaign against her. His company's PR machine spread rumors about her sudden rise, questioning her qualifications, and trying to discredit her in every way possible. They even tried to paint her as a puppet of the board members, as if a woman like her couldn't possibly have the intellect or capability to run a billion-dollar company on her own. But Maria was not easily intimidated. She had faced the harshest judgments her whole life, from her childhood to her career, from being dismissed as a cleaner to being belittled as a leader. She had built her career on proving people wrong, and this was no different. She met the rumors head-on, speaking openly in interviews and public appearances, showing the world who she truly was, a woman who had worked hard, studied the business world, and earned every bit of success she now held. Despite the backlash, Maria's company continued to thrive. She had developed an impressive team, all of whom were fiercely loyal to her leadership. The culture she had fostered was one of innovation and inclusion, where everyone had a voice. The stock price continued to rise, and new partnerships and opportunities flooded in. But the tensions with Jonathan Fairbanks were far from over. He sought to buy out smaller companies that had signed agreements with Maria's firm, trying to choke off her business pipeline. His moves were aggressive, and he hoped that by financially cornering her, he could force her to sell out. Maria wasn't just playing defense, though. She had a few tricks up her sleeve. One evening, she sat with her board of directors in the sleek, modern conference room overlooking the city. Maria had always believed in transparency and trust with her team, and now she was about to reveal her next strategic move. "I know what Jonathan is trying to do," Maria began, her voice calm but confident. "He thinks that he can bankrupt us by cutting us off from the smaller companies we work with. But we're not going to play his game." The room fell silent as everyone waited for her to continue. "We're going to do the opposite. We're going to make an offer to every single company he's trying to acquire, and we'll give them something Jonathan can't: stability and opportunity." Her team looked at each other, unsure of where this was going. But Maria was already a step ahead. She had spent the last few months negotiating with the very companies Fairbanks was targeting, offering them deals that not only benefited them financially but gave them a stake in her company's future. Maria was putting together an alliance, a network of smaller businesses and startups that would make her company even more powerful, even more resilient. If Jonathan thought he could corner her, he was sorely mistaken. By the end of the week, Maria's company had secured agreements with 3 major firms Fairbanks had been targeting, all while strengthening their own financial position. The media caught wind of this shift, and the stories of Maria's resilience spread across the business world. Instead of buckling under the pressure, she had outmaneuvered one of her fiercest competitors. But it wasn't just about the competition. Maria knew that for true change to happen, the culture of corporate America needed to evolve. Her story was not just a personal victory, it was a signal that the old guard, the ones who thought they were untouchable, were no longer in control. Maria wasn't just challenging one man, she was challenging the entire system that had kept people like her on the margins for so long. As the months went by, Maria became a sought-after speaker at conferences and summits. Her story inspired countless others, especially women and people of color who had been overlooked by the corporate world. She became a voice for the voiceless, advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion at every level. But she never let the attention distract her from her mission. Back in the office, Maria was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. Her focus remained unshaken, and she kept her eye on the bigger picture. She knew that the changes she was pushing for would take time, but she was determined to leave behind a legacy of transformation, not just for her company, but for the entire corporate world. Jonathan Fairbanks, meanwhile, found himself on the defensive. His business was faltering as his tactics began to backfire. Employees started leaving, disillusioned with his leadership. Stockholders grew nervous as Maria's company continued to dominate the market, and rumors began to circulate about his own shady dealings. It became clear to everyone that Maria wasn't just a passing phenomenon, she was the future. One fateful afternoon, Jonathan called Maria's office. He had no choice but to offer a truce. The pressure had mounted too high for him to ignore. He proposed a merger. His company would combine with hers, bringing all of their resources together for mutual growth. Maria considered his offer, but she knew that the time for compromise had passed. She had worked too hard to build her own legacy,